Ever since the news broke that the alleged shooter of Charlie Kirk may have used his grandfather's deer hunting rifle, people have really had a hard time spinning their mind around it. They can't understand how some vintage gun that could be 60, 70, 80, 100 years old could have been used to take a precision shot from a rooftop and shoot a man 150 to 200 yards away. They ask questions like, well, if it was Granddad's gun, why does it have modern features like a $2,000 scope and synthetic stocks on it? And if it was Granddad's gun, how was it still functioning? All of these questions that people keep having that keep getting answered in a way that's either misconstrued or just completely uninformed, well, I'm here today to give you a little bit of a lesson about heirloom firearms, their different types and functions, and my thoughts on why this gun appears the way it does, and a little bit of history and context specifically about the Mauser rifle to clear this up for you. If you're new here, my name is Matt Kester. I have never been a member of the military or law enforcement, and I'm just simply a guy who grew up in a family that has heirloom firearms, has been around sporting and hunting firearms like, well, this shotgun of my father's for my whole life. And I can present some context to you and answer some of those questions you might have concerning using Granddad's gun to make a 150-yard kill shot. So, without any further ado, I'm going to dive into it. I'm also an owner of a Mauser 88, but I don't have it here today. It's in the gunsmith because it has some issues, because it sat literally under a bed for 40 years, unlike what I believe this gun may have had. So, let's introduce the context of a heirloom firearm. What is an heirloom firearm? Heirloom firearm is an heirloom just like anything else that is passed down through generations in a family. Some people pass down watches, jewelry, furniture, things like that. Things that were constructed in a different time that have great levels of build quality or have some sort of historical significance or some family significance. The lore of the family may be surrounded in a firearm. There may be stories about it. It may just be simply a gun that one member of the family purchased, has used throughout generations to harvest deer or elk or other game during hunting season, and it works perfectly fine, and it has continued to be passed down through generations because it is both A, functional, and B, it is continuing a tradition inside of a family. So, to get us started with heirloom firearms, I'm going to let you know that, in my opinion, there are two types of heirloom firearms. There are artifact or collectible firearms, and there are functional working heirloom firearms. Let me get the shotgun out of the way. We'll come back to this guy. First, they're what I consider to be artifact or collector firearms. They're firearms that simply probably sit in a case, sit in a safe, sit somewhere off to the side. They never get used. They're kept because they have some sort of significance, whether it was just simply that somebody in the family owned it, maybe it was a war trophy that got brought back from World War II, maybe it was something that somebody carried into battle, but because of certain things like modern evolutions in firearms, or the fact that it has fallen into disrepair, or the fact that it is just so valuable you don't want to take it out of the case and use it, you keep it as an artifact. And as an example of that, I have two such examples that I own. First, I have a Colt Police Positive 3220 Winchester. It is an old vintage handgun that was my great Uncle Murray's. My great Uncle Murray passed away when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, and this is one of the few things that I have to remember him by other than his service medals. He was in the Navy. I think he was in at the very end of the war. He served through the European occupation. Then he became a hurricane hunter and flew in planes through hurricanes testing data. He was one of the first people to ever do that. And after he passed away, I inherited a few guns from him, and this is one such gun. This gun is, in my opinion, practically useless to me. 3220 Winchester is an old black powder load. It doesn't have really good ballistics performance. The firearm itself is quite big. It's also a revolver. It only has 6 shots. All of those negatives that go around a firearm like this. It is also not well functioning. If you can see, it has a timing issue. The cylinder does not line up with the barrel axis. When you cock it, it's got a little bit off right there, right? Well, that presents a problem if you're firing this gun and the cylinder's not completely lined up with the bore. you're gonna have some issues with bullet fragmentation right out of the get-go. So, and the fact that the ammunition is so hard to find, I don't shoot it. I just keep it in the safe, and when I go to the safe to pull out something, I see it and I touch it and see it. I mean, here you got the handles that are falling down. It just reminds me of my uncle, and it's a good positive memory for me. And I don't spend any money to fix it because I'll never shoot it again, simply because it's just impractical and it doesn't work, but it's kept that way. I have another example here that I'll show you. This one was my father's. This is a Colt 41 DA, double action. This gun here is, I believe, the first example of a revolver that was both double action and had a swing out cylinder. They made a double action version of the Peacemaker, but this was the first one the cylinder came out. And if you're unfamiliar with double action, it simply means this. The original revolvers were single action. You had to cock the hammer to fire. Double action, you can pull the trigger and it keeps firing. One reason I don't shoot this gun, I don't use it for anything, is because Colt 41 is an obsolete cartridge. You cannot buy it anywhere that I know of commercially. The only way to get ammunition for this gun is if you hand load. And I don't hand load. I don't know anybody who has the brass or the materials to make loads for this gun, so it doesn't get used. But I keep this gun because this was my father's first gun. It was given to him by his father when he was in 5th or 6th grade. And it has stories behind it. One of the stories is this little chip right here on the grip. When my dad first got it, he went to go run down the street to show it to the neighbor who had an old Peacemaker Colt that had a barrel on it about this long that he was always infatuated with, and they'd talk about guns. And when he was running out to show it to her, it fell out of the crappy holster it was in and made a chip on it. So this gun has a story and a narrative to it in the family, and it's a tradition, and it's something I'll give to my son, and I'll tell him this story of it, and he can remember it about his grandfather and tell the story to his kids about how his granddad shipped this gun. Plain and simple, okay? Also, these guns are not practical in the modern world of shooting. There are better options like, well, this thing. This is my everyday carry, a Glock 30. It's got detachable 10-round magazines, reloads, unloads quick, and it's 45 caliber ACP. It's a much better performing handgun for my potential needs or applications in a defensive shooting. Plain and simple. So these guns sit in the safe and they don't get used. They're brought out as conversation pieces or just when I want to hold them and reminisce. That is an artifact heirloom firearm. The next version of heirloom firearms, which I believe this gun would be, is a working heirloom firearm, and that is a good example here, this shotgun. This is my father's Remington 870 Wingmaster. It's from the 1960s. It is a fully working, fully functioning gun that if I wanted to take it to the range today and go shoot skeet, I would. And I shoot better with this gun than I have ever shot with any type of expensive European over-under firearm, because that's what I've used my younger days shooting. It's what I know, and I like it. It performs well. And because it is a Remington firearm from a bygone era, the production quality on this gun is just amazing. The fit and finish is great. I've never broken anything on it. I've never had a failure to feed. And in its current condition, it is a perfect firearm for whatever my needs might be wing shooting, even with the walnut stocks on it. I don't really waterfowl hunt or anything else, but if I want to go to the range and pop off some clays, I can. If I want to go upland bird hunting here in Arizona, I can. So this gun still looks like how Granddad had it, and it still functions well how Granddad had it, so there's no reason to modify it or change it. I have what will be a future heirloom firearm, and that's this. This is a Winchester Defender 1300, and this is the first gun I ever purchased. This will be a gun that I hand down to my son someday, and he can continue on the tradition of handing down heirloom firearms if he chooses so or not. But this gun is not in the original condition I purchased it. I purchased it when I was 18. It was $200. I was walking through Kmart in Kenai, Alaska, and it caught my eye because of the marking on it right here. It's the Alaska Bear Gun. And I bought this gun. It originally had a traditional stock, like the shotgun I just showed you, that was synthetic, and I changed it over to a fold-over simply because it functions well for my specific needs and use cases, which is I travel a lot with this gun. This is my top defensive firearm I own, and it folds up into a nice compact case, or compact space. And a gun like this, being that it's a shotgun, is pretty much legal in every jurisdiction in the United States, and this specific model is no longer in production, but it is unique in some of the function that it has and the capacity. It has a 7-round tubular magazine, or it's capable of holding 7 rounds in 2 3/4 inch buckshot. And if you know anything about shotguns, you know that if you're ever going to have to use a shotgun, you're going to fight with what's in the gun or what's on the gun, and having one more in the tube than most modern pump guns is an advantage. So I keep it for that reason. Also, it functions perfectly fine as it is, and the Winchester has a unique feature in its in its action, that when you pull the trigger and fire it, it releases the bolt pretty quick, and it allows some extra blowback from the rounds going down the tube to pull it back and give you a faster pump and a more thorough pump to get the next round feeded into it and get another round on target. So I travel with this gun a lot of places. It is my #1 choice for home defense because I prefer a shotgun. I like the idea of having this guy right here send 930 caliber bullets downrange at about the same speed as, well, one of these 45 rounds out of my handgun. And, well, it's like a 9-round burst right out of the gate. And I prefer a shotgun for home defense or a potential defensive situation because studies have shown, versus something like your AR-15 or other modern sporting rifles, this gun here has a lower profile when it comes to prosecutors and juries. Simply put, there have been studies that have shown that use of a shotgun makes you extremely significantly less likely to A, be convicted in a defensive shooting of murder or manslaughter, and B, if you are convicted, you typically would receive a lighter sentence. So that's why I take it. Plus, it's just that much more effective. If you know anything about shotguns, you know. So I think that the shooter's alleged rifle is more like this gun. This is a gun that was purchased at one point in time, and as technologies evolved or new things came out to make it better and more improved, Granddad kept doing that, or even maybe Dad did it when it was handed to him, because it was a working gun. It was a gun that got used. It got taken out every year to dispatch deer, and it kept getting used because it was good at what it did. If this was a heirloom gun of the trophy class or the artifact class that never got used, you wouldn't think to want to go use it because it's just not going to be reliable. And I don't think that this individual was that dumb as to think he could just go pull a rickety gun. He seems to have had some experience with firearms, probably hunting deer and whatever else, so he would have taken that gun to use it. And now I want to specifically talk about the Mauser because there are some things about it that make it unique in the world of firearms. And of course, a lot of people know, have been researching, have learned all these things about the Mauser since this came out, but essentially the Mauser was the AR-15 of its day in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s. And what I mean by that is it was a platform that was accessible, it was easy to get, it was relatively inexpensive, and it could be modified to a lot of different purposes. You see, this gun served and was produced by the millions for the German army from 1898 on through, and served all the way to the end of World War II. And at the end of World War II, basically it had become obsolete for military use. We had automatic rifles that just proved their worth more than a bolt gun, to where nobody started producing or kept producing bolt guns for infantry because they just weren't as good as something like the M1 Garand or any of the other auto-loading rifles of its day. So all of those guns at the end of World War II became surplus, and they were sold as surplus, and a lot of them got imported into the United States. And what happened was, well, they were chambered in a certain cartridge that wasn't popular here in America, but because they could be rebarreled by mom and pop gunsmith shops all over this country, what would happen is they would take the Mauser, take the barrel off, remove a lot of the military features, put a sporterized stock like you see on modern hunting rifles now, or most bolt action hunting rifles, that's more adapted to the hunting or sport shooting category, And then they would drill and tap the receivers and put optics mounts for scopes and whatnot. But they would recalibrate, and 30-06 was a very popular caliber because 30-06 was a popular caliber in this country. It had been used since its adoption in 1906 in the 1903 Springfield, and it was a versatile cartridge. You could do just about anything with it. It had a long history, even at that time, of hand loading. So there was just a lot of knowledge, and it was everywhere in this country. You could walk into a hardware store anywhere and pick up a box of 30-06 ammo. Even to this day, you still can. It's a very common round, and it's a very well-performing round for what people needed it to do in the hunting space. So it was natural to want to put it in there. The magazines matched up perfect so that the 30-06 would go into the magazine without much in the way of modification. The length of the bullet, everything just fit. It was almost like engine swaps today. You take a chassis of a car that you really like, but maybe it's got a crap engine in it, well, or an engine that's just not that common to find parts anymore. You go swap in what is plentiful and well-known, like a Chevy LS. Same kind of deal. Why did it have a synthetic stock if it was Granddad's gun? Well, if Granddad or Dad was using it into the 1980s and the 1990s and the early 2000s, synthetic stocks became more accessible and proved their worth. And synthetic stock, in every measurable way, except for the aesthetics or maybe your preference for feel, is an objectively superior stock for a gun than traditional walnut. It doesn't have any effect from moisture or warping. It lasts longer, and it creates a tighter, more consistent fit. And on the production end of things, because it can be molded, it can be produced a heck of a lot easier than having to shape out wood. Many times, a lot of parts on stocks had to be shaped by hand. My Mauser is a prime example. There are chisel marks all over on the inside of the stock where it was fitted. And as time went by, optics got better. People kept improving it because this gun, as a basic system, worked fine. The rifling, the barrel would have been good. If it shot true, then you just kept working with it because there was no need to go out and spend way more money to get something brand new when this gun worked perfectly fine, and you could just upgrade it incrementally as new technologies came out and were adapted. Now, let's talk about some of the other aspects of the Mauser while I got a little time here. And that is going back to how they were imported and their availability. You see, before things like the Gun Control Act in 1968, firearms really weren't regulated in the way that they are today. There was no paperwork trail on them or anything else. And there's a question in the text messages where the shooter is alleged to have said something about, oh, I don't know if it has a serial number or not, blah, 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 but Granddad's going to be pissed. Well, they do have a serial number. Every firearm that is produced, even for foreign militaries, has some sort of serialization to it. On the Mauser, the one I have is a commercially produced FN Mauser that was made after the war because the patents had expired and European companies, arms companies especially, needed to get some cash flow going. So they started producing that receiver because that receiver was strong, adaptable. It was a design that already existed. They didn't have to spend any money on R&D for it, and they could start producing arms to sell to the sporting world, chambered in a lot of different calibers all over the world. Mine, the serial number and the date stamping is actually on the bottom side of the receiver, so you don't naturally see it when you look at it, but there is a serial number there. And even military rifles all have some sort of serialization and mark that can identify the armory that they were built by and lots that they were built in, simply because a military needs to keep track of its inventory, and you need to know serial numbers and dates of manufacture, so you can be aware of when to start cycling out older platforms. It's plain and simple as that. But when I first heard that this was a Mauser rifle, I thought, well, good luck tracking that down. And that goes back to that Firearms Act of '68 and even the 1998 adoption of the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. Because even though they say they don't keep records, I guarantee you that every time that there's a firearms transaction that data lands with the ATF, they keep it locked away somehow. You just don't throw away data like that. And if legally or illegally or whatever they're doing, I guarantee there's a paper trail somewhere. There's also a paper trail amongst dealers. But before the National Firearms Act the National Gun Control Act in 1968, there was no regulation like that. You didn't have to prove your identity. You didn't have to prove your age. In fact, you could order firearms through the mail and have them delivered to your house with literally no questions asked. That National Gun Control Act kind of came about in the aftermath of a lot of the political unrest and violence and assassinations that took place in the 1960s. So, if this gun was originally purchased before those dates and it never changed hands through an official transfer, which transferring it down within the family is considered a private transfer, it does not need to have any paper trail behind it. It doesn't need to go through any background check system or anything else. This gun could literally have no background, no paper trail, no nothing. So had it not been for a father and a grandfather potentially recognizing it in a photo and starting to ask questions, and there was no other data linking this alleged shooter to the shooting, like the photos we've seen, that gun would have potentially been a complete and utter dead end for law enforcement. And I know I'm sounding like a gun grabber here. I'm not. I'm a 100% I support the Second Amendment. And I think that everyone should have pretty much an unfettered access to firearms if they so choose. But there are literally hundreds of thousands of firearms like that that predate all of these gun control measures in circulation in this country. And it's something that we as a nation need to understand, and understand in the context of the gun control debate that is almost certainly raging or beginning to rage around this shooting and all the other mass shootings that have taken place over the last few years and currently going forward today. Because no matter what you put in for gun control legislation going forward to stop people from buying new or transferring firearms now, there are plenty of firearms capable of doing plenty of damage that are already in circulation. And you're not going to go get them all, because I'm not giving you my guns, and I know plenty of other people are not going to either. So this is something that probably should be considered in the context of whatever upcoming firearms control legislation that I'm sure is going to be coming down the pike. So I'll leave you with that. I'm going to get out and start doing some more ballistics testing, but I just wanted to make some videos to get out so I had some content for you guys and to start answering some of these more knowledge or philosophically based questions that are coming out. So have a great day.